Can everybody hear me okay? Is there any background noise or anything? If someone give me a thumbs up and let me know if I'm good to go. Okay, awesome. I apologize. Of course, as life, Murphy's Law, whenever I try to do a presentation at home, that's when the guy outside decides to cut his grass. So hopefully there's not that much interference, so we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce myself, but I want to kind of open up and talk about the content we're going to go through today because I'm really excited to be here to open up our new workshop series. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm just going to get request to share. So I'll just need to get my folks at the library to enable the sharing for me, and then I'll go ahead and be able to share. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, welcome to ChatGPT Me, Power Skills for the AI Era. So my name is Rich Jester. I'm really, really excited to be here with you today to talk to you about AI on behalf of the AI Commission and the Delaware Advisory Council for CTE Education. So again, it's been a great journey to get here. We're really, really excited to be able to talk about AI with you and to help you, build what is going to become an AI curriculum for the Delaware public. So this workshop series, this is the first session in the series. We're kicking this off in October, and then we're going to begin with in-person sessions starting in January of 2026. So to introduce myself again, my name is Rich Jester. I'll talk a little bit more about my background here in a moment. But the mission here is recently, in the most recent meeting of the full Delaware Artificial Intelligence Commission, we adopted a resolution to develop public AI curriculum, one to ensure that our citizens here in Delaware are informed, empowered, and prepared for the AI native future. And while there are other people within the AI Commission working on specific training curriculums for state government, for education, we're here specifically to talk about AI for the public. So the goal here is to demystify AI, give you some really good information on what you can use, how you can access it, and show you practically what's going on in these applications. And all of these sessions, including today's, are going to follow an extremely similar format. So again, nobody hates to, or everyone hates to sit and listen to someone talk for an hour straight without any interaction. So we're going to try not to do that today. Again, these are not theoretical seminars. The first 20 minutes is going to be what I call core concept learning. And then after that, we're going to jump right into hands-on demonstrations or guest presentations. Again, the goal here is practical guidance. So we want to go beyond just the what is generative AI into showing you, what it is, what it does, and how you can use it to benefit your life. How can you use it to benefit your business, or possibly is this a potential career path you want to go down to if you're a student? And again, we're looking here with a constant focus on career paths and skills that are least resistant to automation. And without further ado, I want to kind of talk about just what's upcoming. We have 4 more sessions that are going to be scheduled in the first 4 months. So essentially the second or third week of every month, we're going to be having an in-person AI seminar at one of the Delaware libraries. So in this case, we have our next session, January 14th, is Prompting Essentials. This will specifically talk about how to write good prompts, good context engineering, and how to really unlock the power of AI through how you control what you ask. So using the power of human language, English language to really unlock what this can accomplish. Second, we're going to be talking in February with AI music and gaming. We have 2 local businesses, a local hip hop artist and a local company that trains students for esports are going to be presenting, talking about the importance of AI in gaming, as well as how AI can be used for content generation and audio production and music production. Then on March 18th, we're going to talk about models, agents, and assistants. I will briefly mention agentic AI today, but since we have a whole session dedicated to it, I'm not going to go in depth in this session, but we will talk about it and you will see some applications today. My guest for that will also be Patrick Callahan, another one of the commission members, to talk about the regulatory sandbox that we're putting in place to be able to interact with Delaware applications. So in the future, if we enable the state of Delaware to connect to things like the Division of Incorporations and other services, we want to make sure it can be done in a safe way that decreases the likelihood bad actors are going to use it for essentially bad reasons. And last but not least, in April, we have our AI for small business. This is going to cover specifically how to use AI and agents for small business. It's going to come with a lot of practical information about how entrepreneurs, even students, can use it to jumpstart businesses, how you can use it to create business plans, but taking it a little bit farther in what parts of your automation can you automate? Do you really need customer service? Do you really need um, a helpline up front and what you can kind of do to automate that. We have other sessions that are planned, but we haven't quite fixed dates for those yet, including a session on AI in manufacturing, where we're going to be partnering again with Delaware companies. So the goal here is not some abstract company you've barely heard of telling you about how awesome AI is. The goal is to show you practical information about AI and then talk to people in your community here in Delaware that are actually using it to benefit their life. So a little bit about me. So my name is Rich Jester. I've had a very eclectic career, which started in college when I worked for the Walt Disney Corporation, leading tours and things in the parks. My undergraduate is in English, which is a surprise considering, of course, we're going to be talking heavily about technology and AI. All I can tell you about that is being an English major gave me a major advantage when it comes to things like large language models because I have a way, being able to interpret language, being able to read, process information, and then figure out how to apply that information is a extremely critical skill set here in the age of AI. In addition, to my role as Secretary of the Delaware Artificial Intelligence Commission. I'm also Vice Chair of the Delaware Chapter for Business Professionals of America. I've been volunteering with BPA for the past 15 years. So, working with middle and high school students, giving them AI native skills, and helping them adopt the soft skills that really allow them to turn AI into a powerhouse. You can see from some of the pictures of some of our kids from our most recent National Leadership Conference in Florida, as well as a recent event I did at my firm, JP Morgan Chase, where we invited a lot of our Delaware BPA champions to come present their websites and get feedback from real professionals. I also serve as a member of the Delaware Advisory Council for Career and Technology Education. So this is the Governor's Council that oversees 509 funding. So again, just to reinforce, I'm coming at this from a STEM CTE point of view. And again, because I work for a bank, people don't often associate banking and finance with STEM. However, when you really get down to it, anything that involves technology now is STEM. I can essentially tell you how you can apply, STEM principles to every single subject, including music and art. It's quite amazing what AI actually has the capability to do, and especially when we look at how we can empower our students to do more in the future. Now, enough about me. Let's talk about AI. So, we're going to start off with some real key concepts in artificial intelligence. So, starting off, I like to give a 30,000-foot view of what AI is because a lot of people hear the word AI in the media. AI could mean an app, AI could mean science, AI could mean, a subset or a category. It could also mean a actual machine itself. What we're talking about for the purposes of this discussion is AI as an entire field of science dedicated to one big goal, making machines capable of performing tasks that require human intelligence. So underneath this umbrella, you have a lot of things that you may have heard of, some maybe not. Machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, robotic process automation, which is different from robotics, natural language processing, generative AI. And in short, at a high level, machine learning is the engine at which AI was made possible. So 10 years ago, when we first, saw IBM Watson on Jeopardy compete, what we saw a machine learning tool, but not what you would probably call something typical of AI today. That was one of the first attempts at what we now call deep learning, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple minutes. And then we're going to talk about other things that are important. So when you talk about AI or generative AI, you're really going to be focusing in these areas of computer vision, natural language processing, because without NLP, you have no way to actually interact with the system, whether it's code or whether it's um, simply just how we approach um, a problem. Everything requires NLP. And then as a professional, that's actually where the majority of my expertise. So I started my career back in 2006 testing the most boring software imaginable. Okay, back when we actually used to send in checks and we'd have to image both sides of a check in order to process payment as bank. That technology eventually became what's called micro or OCR and ICR, which stand for optical character recognition, and intelligent character recognition, which eventually became natural language processing, which then became LLMs and generative AI. So you'll see a lot of the things that we're talking about today have been around in some more primitive form for years. And really the AI is just a confluence of technology, energy, and innovation. So this is my absolute favorite infographic ever in order to display a technology problem. So machine learning is essentially the subset where algorithms learn from data to make predictions or decisions. Supervised learning is where they learn with a teacher or a guidance, meaning someone's telling them uh, what's right or wrong, someone's telling them what's good or bad, someone's providing actual feedback. Unsupervised learning does the same thing, but without that kind of advisor role. It learns from learning. So in a lot of ways, unsupervised learning could be more efficient unless your data quality is poor or your data understanding is poor, in which case that might not work very well. And then reinforcement learning, which is where you essentially apply penalties, triggers, slide dials, rewards to how the machine evaluates the data. So in a lot of ways, this says here's a optimal result set. We're going to take out the answers. We're going to give the AI the questions. He's going to run through the questions, and then we're going to evaluate how those answers compared with the answers that the human being got. And again, be able to apply those, incrementally as -1 +1, depending on whether it got it wrong or it got it right. That's essentially what machine learning is. So again, data, apply some kind of function or algorithm to it, and then make a prediction. Deep learning is taking that and supersizing it in a way. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, a subset of AI that uses what are called neural networks, which for sake are simply just layers of nodes or essentially machine learning algorithms layered together like neurons in the human brain. What deep learning does is it essentially takes that unsupervised learning that we just talked about in the previous slide and kind of amps it up considerably, allowing people to actually focus on other things because it does things like automated feature extraction. It's high accuracy in the sense that deep learning on the same set of data has a higher likelihood of getting it right than previous, primitive machine learning algorithms. A good example or bad example, depending on how you look at it, is TikTok's For You page. One thing that I am quoted very often as saying is that TikTok's algorithm is ruthless when it comes to engagement. It doesn't care if that engagement is positive, if it's happy, if it's sad, if it's negative, if it's positive, it doesn't care. All it cares about is keeping your eyes glued to that screen and measuring how fast it is before you flip to the next video, whether you watch the entire video at all. All of those are inputs that it's taking in at one time to be able to decide what the next video it's going to show you is, with the goal, obviously, of maintaining your engagement completely. Other examples of deep learning, Google Photos, for example, you'll notice how Google Photos and even Apple Photos will suggest memories, things like that. That's using deep learning by understanding what it knows about humanity combined with what it sees in your photos. Tesla Autopilot, again, uses deep learning for autonomous driving. We'll talk a little bit about more some of the other technologies involved with that a little bit later on. And Spotify, being able to recommend music based on previous music that you listen to. Again, this is all deep learning. Same thing can be said about Netflix's recommendation for movies, where as you watch movies, whether you binge movies or not, it actually will create new categories customized based on your viewing preferences. And the more profiles you have under Netflix, the smarter it gets in terms of being able to predict what each person is. However, if you're like me and you have your entire family watches on one Netflix profile, it can sometimes come up with some pretty interesting recommendations that neither me nor my wife would be interested in watching. Natural language processing. So, natural language processing is an area of AI that enables computers to understand, interpret, and generate human language. I've already given you a lot of examples from my own personal career in that, and essentially how banks use it. AI systems and smart speakers. So, Siri on your phone is an example, Amazon Alexa, anything where you can ask your machine to do something and then it actually does it. That is natural language processing. In the same time, anytime you are translating something into text, that's natural language processing. So if you upload an image to an LLM and say, hey, copy the text from this, or you simply go like on an iPhone where you can click in Apple Photos and you can actually click on the photo and it will automatically highlight the text and allow you to extract that. That is real-time translation. That is actual text extraction. You also will notice in different applications like Google News and others, there's text summarization. It's also being introduced in Outlook and newer versions of Copilot, where you don't have to necessarily read the entire thing. It'll give you a 2 to 3 sentence that summarize the entire article. There's actually a lawsuit going on right now between several media companies and Google News because, as a result of Google adding summaries to all of their articles, the actual full read rate for the articles for certain media providers has plummeted. Because, again, the human brain takes the shortcut of saying, if I have a summary, why do I need to read the entire article? Well, I think most of the people on this call, as well as the people that have helped me put this together, would agree that you need to read the entire thing to realize if the summary is right. Because more often than not, the summaries don't actually capture what the article is about, or they simply manage to capture just a general background and don't actually cover the necessary points that are made in the article. Lastly is kind of sentiment analysis. This is, again, like, dislike, hate, being able to identify, social media tools are known for sentiment analysis, being able to monitor if a certain post is too toxic and then automatically banning it or taking it down, those kind of things. Again, that's all natural language processing. You have to have a system that understands what combination of words mean happy, what combination of words mean sad, what combination of words mean I hate you or I'm angry or I love this. So all of that requires underlying systems. So what you're going to start to see, especially with AI, and now that we talk about the next topic, computer vision, which is literally about how machines see the world, AI is not just one system. It's fair sometimes to just refer to all of these different things as AI, but you will get purists that say they're not AI. But in reality, these are the kind of concepts that you'll need, or the building blocks to design your processes, or to simply just figure out ways you can creatively use AI to improve your life. Computer vision. This is the field of artificial intelligence that lets computers interpret and make decisions based on data. So facial optical recognition, object detection, medical imaging and analysis, security surveillance. These are all examples of this. So for example, I have cameras, Google doorbell. The Google doorbell not only tells me when someone rings the doorbell, it actually, through the camera, can identify pets. Most of the time, it identifies squirrels as pets, but it does identify animals. Um, it can't differentiate between a wild animal and a pet, so everything is a pet. But again, that's computer vision. It's basically using machine learning, AI, and these other techniques that we've discussed to allow computers to see an approximation of what human sees. The human eye combined with human brain is an intensely complex processing machine. And what you'll find is things that you would think are easy for a machine to understand might not actually be that easy to understand because your brain has, 10, 20, 30, 40 years of object association to draw on. Whereas a computer vision model only has the data that it was trained on. So in a way, and the same thing with things like Tesla's autopilot, Amazon's Face ID and optical ID, these are all examples of computer vision. being used as authentication, being used as inputs to answer a question or a problem. Okay. So coming up next. Okay, so up next, I want to talk a little bit about bringing it all together. So, big takeaway here. Talked about a bunch of different topics. Okay, generative AI is the tool. The LLM is the brains or the engine behind the tool. You you hear AI and LLM thrown around like confetti. Let's cut through the noise. Basically, look at AI as a tool in your workshop. An LLM is simply the engine behind that. So a model trained by a master carpenter gives you a masterpiece, whereas a model trained on cheap flat pack furniture instructions gives you, well, you kind of get the idea. The AI is the machine you use to get the job done. The model is the engine or the expertise that governs what the machine can actually do. And this is exactly why we don't just have one AI model today. There are hundreds of models out. I mean, we're going to talk about, 4 or 5 of them today. But again, this is an incredibly innovative and fast changing landscape. So going out, exploring what these different tools are, what they do, what they're good at versus what they're terrible at, really depends on your profession. Um, what I'm going to go through next kind of has a disclaimer. So I'm going to talk about essentially 4 different AI models and 5 different tools. I am not saying by any means that these are the absolute best for every profession in every situation. I myself am incredibly opinionated when it comes to AI, and my evaluation of these models actually changes every day. So depending on, because again, these models are being updated based on new data that's being generated, based on tweaking and refinement that they're doing to the algorithms, which is again why things like explainability and stuff like that are incredibly important. But I have 6 different AI apps on my phone. I only use a paid version of one of them. The reason I do that is because different apps are good at different things. And if you ever have used a free version of anything, you know you'll eventually use all of your free credits in one day and then need to do something else and jump to another app. So this is another reason why I have multiple. Now, before I jump in and I talk about kind of pitfalls to watch an AI before we start our demo, I want to talk about something you may have heard about in the media called vibe coding. Okay. And again, this is one of those things that's changing the traditional paradigm of computer science and how applications and programs are actually delivered and developed now. And later on, if we have time at the end of this demo, I'm going to give you an example of what one of those vibe coding tools is, a tool called lovable.ai. So here you can see this is vibe coding basically. So traditional coding, unless you're someone who's taught coding in middle and elementary school, um, typically it felt very stale. It was very hard to get people excited about it because it required a lot of memorization knowledge up front. Your feedback that you got back was this doesn't work. Well, how do you fix it? You go on Google, you type it in, you try to figure out what's wrong, or you learn more and more about the language and figure out what's wrong that way. Languages change every couple of years. So, a language that you studied in college, by the time you graduate, probably isn't the language that the industry is actually using, unless you're fortunate to work for a university that really emphasizes that. Vibe coding is the essential synergy of logic, technology, and emotion. And this is going to sound really abstract until I show this to you, but I wanted to kind of talk about this now because this is the way applications are developed. This is the way PowerPoint presentations are being built with AI, where it's more about being able to have a canvas, be able to build stuff within that canvas, and then have it react to your emotions based on what it built. So where traditional design was about building blocks on top of building blocks, and then using advanced techniques and using expert techniques, this essentially automates the technique part and focuses more on you trying to build what you want to build as quickly as you can. Um, and again, this is going to sound abstract, but once you see the example later on, I think you're going to get this. Now, before we jump into our demo, I have to talk about hallucinations. Okay. Hallucinations are not, what happened in the 70s and 80s when people went into back rooms together. Hallucinations are essentially what happens when AI generates content that is factually inaccurate, nonsensical, or completely fabricated. This is always a possibility. In the software industry, we like to say that failure is always an option, and sometimes failure is the best option. But this is important to understand. Artificial intelligence, AI as we know it today, despite what you see on TV, despite what you hear in the headlines, is incredibly fallible. It is only as good as the validation mechanisms that are put in place to make sure the content is of quality. It's not an answer machine. LLMs are trained to predict the statistically probable next word or sequence of words based on vast data they've consumed. They're pattern matching engines. They're not conscious sentient beings. They are not a giant brain of infinite connections and infinite data facts. It is very finite. And it's important to understand this when you're looking at how you introduce AI into your daily life, because there are plenty of times where you create AI and it's complete and total garbage. And I'm going to show you an example of that here in a little bit of something that was created with Google Gemini for this presentation that was completely useless. Improvisation is not integrity. So when an AI answers a query it wasn't trained on, it's going to make a guess or try to make a guess at what it thinks you want. You see this a lot of times, where some LLMs, like for example, Grok, which is not very good at image editing. It can create images very fast, but whether or not it's an image that's actually useful and that you'd want to actually use, that's a completely different story. So, I like a good analogy I like to say is you don't need a Porsche Cayenne to go grocery shopping. All you really need is two legs and a bag, but it's really how fast you want to get there and how much you want to carry. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're playing with these different tools, because hallucinations are the fastest way for a technology person, a business person, or any professional to lose credibility fast. Because if you just copy and paste what AI writes without actually vetting the content, you're going to end up propagating crap, and then people are going to think you're either lazy, you're stupid, but it's all just because you just simply lack the time to go through and do that validation step. Now, you may ask, why does this happen? It could be because of training data limitations, could be because it didn't understand the question, maybe because your prompt was vague, or it could be a lack of constraints, meaning that, in some cases, and this is a good example, I like to talk about Grok because Grok has less constraints than a lot of the other models do. So it can be more creative, but more creative is not necessarily a good thing when you want a specific result or a specific answer, or you need to make sure your math is right. You don't want Grok or ChatGPT making up its own kind of math because you simply asked the question a weird way. But that actually can happen. And these models again are designed to be creative and fluent. And while they do have some guardrails, the guardrails may not actually prevent them from creating copyrighted content. You're starting to hear about things in the media now where different movie companies, owners of IP like Warner Brothers, things like that, are suing these companies that build these image generation tools because they simply, their intellectual products being infringed. And that's not an easy problem to solve from a generative AI. When you're trying to teach a model to create something, and when you tell it to create Bugs Bunny, how does the model know that Bugs Bunny is not something that it should allow you to create? Or should it always just create you something that looks like Bugs Bunny, but not quite Bugs Bunny so you don't get sued? Again, you get into some really difficult ethical areas here when you're talking about these kind of stuff. But you're probably more interested in how do you actually spot hallucinations. Here's just a couple examples: confidently stated falsehoods, nonsensical connections, fabricated sources. If you use AI for research, click on every single one of those links and make sure that the actual headline matches what's actually in the link. I can't tell you how many times ChatGPT has done research for me and given me a link, but it's a link to a website, but the study or paper or article that it supposedly quoted in the research doesn't actually exist. It just made it up that it might exist on this website. So you can't, and again, this is the dual side of AI, which is you can get a lot done fast, but you can also get a lot wrong fast too. You know, overly generic or vague answers. If something looks really, really good right out of the box, odds are it probably isn't. Always apply a critical eye to the outputs. And I'm going to show you in the next example what that really means. So here's an attempt where I tried to have it create a graphic for the last two slides that you just saw. Okay, this is an example in Google Gemini. At first glance, looks cool image, right? It's got some really neat coloring. It's got really great contrast. It's got little miniature icons next to it. But the more you look into it, you can see how much it hallucinated. I mean, these are just 5 spelling errors. Factually, couldn't get right. It spelled hallucination 3 different ways. It spelled plausible wrong. It spelled fabricated wrong. All of, and you can even see in the second bullet on the left side, it's just a complete garbage image. It looks like it was trying to create a speech bubble with something inside, and then it just crapped out and didn't do it. And then if you look in the top right corner next to the word script, I think that's a piece of parchment, which maybe because I use the word script, I don't quite understand. Or, and then an icon, which I don't even really know what that is. But again, this is why it's important to always validate your outputs. Because you could end up something that, especially if you don't have your glasses on, like happened to me multiple times, then you copy and paste this and you'll end up looking like an idiot because someone automatically knows you created AI generated content. Now, real quick, before I start live demonstrations, I will open it up for a quick 5 minutes of questions. Does anybody have any questions on any of the stuff that I covered so far? Okay. All right.
Hey, Rich.
Hey, Mara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
Do you have a favorite of all those AI apps that you have on your phone? Is that something you're going to get into, or do you use
Yeah,
them all?
I'm going to use 4 different ones. My current preference is Google Gemini, which I'll demo here in a little bit. It's the only one that I pay for because I use Gmail a lot, and when you connect Gmail to Gemini, it becomes a lot smarter. It can emulate your writing style. It also enables certain add-ins in Gmail and Google and other Google applications where you can ask an AI not just questions about what's on the internet, you can ask questions about documents on your Google Drive, or you can ask questions about emails. So it becomes really powerful in that sense because it's allowed to do that. Now, ChatGPT on my iPhone. Did you have a question, Mara? I'm sorry. I saw you
Nope,
come on.
that's good.
So we'll talk. Well, I'll show you a little bit more because I'll give you some examples of why I use certain models versus other ones. But in reaction to what you just said, let me go ahead and. So before we get in, I just want to kind of talk about different types of models. Okay. So AI world, like I mentioned, isn't just one giant brain. It's a team of specialized workers. Understanding unique skills is critical for applying them correctly. What you see with Anthropic's Claude or Google Gemini and even the ChatGPT app, this is what we refer to as multimodal, meaning it can fluently process combinations of text, images, and code and output text, images, or code. Some models are are specifically one type or another. So like if you've heard of Midjourney or you've heard of Dolly, Dolly is actually the image generation model inside ChatGPT that is only for generating images. It will take text and a combination of text and another input type and create an image. Video models, you've heard of Google's Veo, you've heard of Sora 2, Pika is another one. These are models that are specifically designed for generating video. So when you're using the Google Gemini app and you ask it to create a video, it's actually going to create a video using Google Veo. That's actually the model that it accesses and uses. So it's important to understand this when you're looking at what do you need. Sometimes if you just need text to text, Claude is very good for that. It's a very lightweight, very simple model. When you need to go deep research and you're looking at the internet and you want to know good internet versus bad internet, Google Gemini might be better for you. And I'll show you some of those examples real quick. So I'm going to show you essentially 4 different applications. Okay, the first one I'm going to show is ChatGPT. So again, this is the ChatGPT interface. This I've logged in using my Google account, but I don't pay for ChatGPT. So what you'll notice is, so if I ask it to create an image of a dog sleeping on top of a doghouse, let's see how long it takes. Now, what you'll notice is this is a free version. I am last in the queue because I am free. The enterprise people are first in the queue. The people who have the pro or middle tier are the second in the queue, and then everybody else is after that. So if you want faster generation, if you want more generations over the course of a day, you can see it's already prompting me to upsell me to a plus account because it's taking almost 30 seconds to generate an image. I'm going to run the exact same prompt on Google Gemini, which uses the Google Gemini Pro subscription, to give you an example of what the difference is. So you can see it's still going, still going. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one here into Gemini. Still going, still going. Okay, do we actually finish yet? ChatGPT still hasn't finished. So this is the difference between behind the paywall and in front of the paywall. And you can see it, the picture of this. Now let's see what happens when I try to make it do a copyrighted image. So create an image of Snoopy on a doghouse on Halloween. Okay. Now, Google has access to obviously Google Images. So it's likely that this particular image that's on here is probably something that they searched and brought up. But it also could be something that they completely generated. When you don't actually get to see underneath in Gemini what that actually is. Now, if I go over here, it still hasn't finished. In fact, what it decided to do was it stopped the action because it saw I was using another model within the browser. So what it did was it's saving ChatGPT server bandwidth by not proceeding with it because it sees that I did something else on another model. Again, this is another reason why I use multiple models on my phone, because depending on their underlying infrastructure, sometimes things go down. Now let's see what it does if I try to do the Snoopy thing again. And again, most of the applications have a copy button, so you don't have to literally copy and then hit control copy, control paste. Let's see what it actually does. See, it just completely hosed. And this is something that I've noticed a lot about the free version of ChatGPT. It hoses a lot. where it will literally just crap out versus when you pay for it, because I originally did have a paid version of this, but then I stopped because they created multiple pay tiers, and basically the current paid tier is not much better than free. But you can see it's just spinning. It's not even going in. It's not even doing anything. Where if I try to go in and I say here, again, you can see not a bad image. But again, I'm using the paid version. I have a lot of time in here creating images. The other thing that I'll mention about this is you can always start like this, but then sometimes you want to get specific things. Like let's say for you want to create an image that's closer to the old Disney cartoons. Okay. So for example, I can say, but I'm going to do something different. And this is a trick that I use a lot, which is a little counterintuitive. So instead of telling the AI what to do, what I'm going to say instead is write an image generation prompt. So what I did here is I'm actually getting the AI to write the prompt for me, where in the sense that I know kind of what I want to do. In this case, it just generated the prompt outright. So because I have a habit of literally running the prompt as soon as I write it, it's automatically jumping and running it for me. Now let's see what it says when I try to do it over here. And you see how long that took? And it wasn't until I came back into this session. So when AI companies talk about maximizing, they need maximized energy usage, things like that, employing stuff like that decreases the amount of load. Now, it can be argued whether or not you should be offering a free version if it's just not going to work. But that's again not for necessarily for me to decide, but it's definitely a worthwhile discussion point. So now I'm going to I'm going to ask it to create an image gen prompt to create an image to accompany a slide on demoing ChatGPT. How much you want to bet it gets a lot smarter? Okay, so we're going to run this here. So it's important when you're talking about if your organization is going to make a deal with OpenAI or any of these companies, and you're going to engage at an enterprise level, you should have non-functional or performance specifications. How fast do you expect basic images to be generated? How many images per day? If you're not going to be generating 300 images a day, don't pay for it. But if you don't know how many images are, don't sign up for just 10. So you never know how people are going to use these tools until you actually get in and use them. And adopting AI on an enterprise level has other risks. And when we talk about our session specifically on AI agents will get into that a little bit more. But essentially, you can see in here, it just takes forever. Meanwhile, it's already done something here. Now you can see it hallucinate a little bit with the text, but I could probably use Apple Images and clean that up if I wanted to. But if it was a small image on a deck, nobody would probably notice that. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to kind of mention here is extensions are a big deal with AI. So you can see here, like, for example, if I've asked this, create a Google form. Now, I pay for Google Gemini, so you would assume that it can go ahead in and use Google and create a Google form that would allow me to get feedback on my AI workshop. It doesn't actually do it for me. So again, it's entirely possible as an administrator or even as a user to overestimate what these models do. My guess is even with the top tier, I can't do this because it probably takes a lot of effort, energy wise, or a lot of hops to go from ChatGPT or Google Gemini to Google Forms because it requires things like authentication and stuff like that. Anything that requires you to validate something probably isn't going to connect with ChatGPT out of the box. You're going to need to make it into some kind of an agent in order to do that. So you can see on here, facilitation and delivery. I mean, it's not bad. I could literally do this. If I wanted to export this to a document, now it didn't actually process that, but if I go down here and I click on this, sometimes like in the sense where if I go back and I look at this, you can see it creates a lot of things, but I tried to do image generation for multiple and the images were just crap every time. Like every single one had multiple spelling errors or it had what I would call fidelity loss where the high def kind of just jumbles in the middle, things like that. The reason I use image generation is because it's usually relatable for a lot of people. Now, real quick, I want to show you Claude. So Claude is one of the more lightweight LLMs in the sense that you can deploy it on a device. You don't need necessarily access to the internet. It's used a lot with code writing tools. So, for example, I can ask Claude to write a Python script. What Claude does is it actually, because this is one of the tools that's used heavily for code generation, it actually opens up a separate canvas here where I can actually copy and paste this. I can download it as a Py script. I can publish this. So I could publish this to publish and copy link, and then I could link this and have somebody else go and access this. So if I'm, writing code to that, writing code with a team, I solve a problem, I can do this. Now, if I'm using a proprietary software tool, I'm not going to be copying and pasting code from my source code into this because it's going to learn on this. Now, I could download a local version of this that Anthropic and Claude can't use that I could then use for the code, but I would never expose that externally to the internet. But in a simple case, this doesn't just tell you, it didn't just write the script, but it automatically gave me instructions on how to actually run it. And so I could literally bring up a terminal right now on my iMac and I could download this script and I could actually run this script. So let's say, for example, write a SQL script or write an Excel formula. Or how about this? Everybody who has done anything fun with Excel knows what a VLOOKUP is. So explain a VLOOKUP in Excel. What's nice about this is you're getting something that was designed by people whose expertise is programming and coding. And it's specifically looking at what are the most reliable sources for that. Things like GitHub, W3, that kind of stuff. So or it's going directly to Microsoft, but it's providing you very simple information on here. Now you'll notice, now if I ask it to, it's going to tell you it can't because this particular model is a straight text model. It's why it's lean. It's why it doesn't take a lot of energy. It's why it doesn't take up a lot of space because it's designed just to do technology stuff, essentially just to do text-based communication. Now, if I wanted to do CSS code, um, or create an SVG vector graphic that'll display in the browser, again, I'm writing code to be displayed. I'm not actually creating an image. So, Claude, for example, our applications at JP Morgan Chase allow us to use not just one model. We can use Claude, we can use different versions of ChatGPT because you want to use the best engine to solve the problem. And in some cases, like in a lot of cases, we use Claude for development. We also use a version of Microsoft's ChatGPT, which is called Copilot, that is an extension that can be added to our development tools. Now, I do have a couple more things that I want to cover before the end of this, so I want to kind of show my favorite. This is my,
Rich,
sorry?
excuse me for a second. You have a question in a
Oh, sure,
chat.
go ahead. Thank you for letting me know. Apologies. What's the question?
When you use Google, is the AI summary that pops up done by Gemini?
Yes, unless it says otherwise. But it's almost, when you have a company like Google or Alphabet that has all of these different services, it's usually better for them to use whatever model is local. Now you're seeing more and more this kind of multimodal in the same way back in the day, you couldn't get PlayStation games for Xbox. Now you can. AI models are much the same thing, where they're designing their tools to be model agnostic. So you might be a Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Power Platform user, but you might have access to Gemini, Claude, or OpenAI, but ChatGPT might be the default. Really depends. Did I answer your question? But usually, yes, Gemini. Okay. Last but not least is Lovable. So this is a vibe coding tool. What it does is it allows you to generate not just an image, not just text, not just a voice file, but actually allows you to generate an entire application. Okay. We'll just do something that I'm sure some people on this call can relate to. So you can see it's already from that one line starting to interpret and make decisions on what it wants to build. So based on, I gave it a prompt to create a website for a Taylor Swift fan club. It has automatically assumed dreamy pastels based on her iconography that she uses on her album covers and on her posters. It's identifying features that might be relevant for this. And then it's designing which design system to use. So what design system could be the underlying code base. That could also be custom button variants, things like that. And it's going to generate all of the images that are going to be on the website as well. So I can show you, it's literally creating content for the entire website. It's thinking again after it created content. It's editing it. And again, if I paid for the next premium tier, it would probably generate a lot faster. But for the purpose of this is the public, and not everybody can afford to subscribe to them. I know I can't, to like 9 different AIs. It's important to see, but you may. That's why these companies also offer monthly tiers for this. So if you need to do a lot of app design for 1 or 2 months and you don't need to do it again, you subscribe for those 2 months, and then when you're done, you exit out and you cancel a subscription. I've done that multiple times when I needed advanced features for a specific project. I upgrade mine, I use it for the project, and then I downgrade it when I'm done. So while this is going through and generating, many of you are probably familiar with the Zoom recording and transcription feature. So what I'd like to show you is this is an example of an app called otter.ai that I use to actually take all of my meeting notes. So you can see in here, it's actually joined the meeting. So if you look at all the people that have signed into Zoom, you will be able to see a note taker, and you can actually see it transcribing what I'm saying as I'm saying it.
Oh, wow.
The other nice, neat thing that it does is it grabs screenshots every time the screen changes. So if I've got 40 slides, it's actually grabbing it every single time. So if I need to go back, yep,
Yep, there's a question in chat, and
sure. Go ahead.
you might kind of answer it just a moment ago. Does Lovable use current real-time content?
What do you mean by current real-time content?
Missy, do you want to say it?
It
Sure.
uses,
Thank you, Elta. Is it combing the internet like in real time?
yeah, or it's been already indexed for specific things. Taylor Swift is a commonly searched thing. So I'm sure in the back end there's tags, because you can see it actually built the entire website here. This is the entire website. If I wanted to, I could push this to the internet and deploy it right now. But it built the entire website, including a community page, including the latest updates, including Eras Tour, which talks about all the albums. So let's say I want to add.
I was just asking because she just released that brand new thing and I didn't see that referenced here on this page.
Usually, so here's the thing. It takes a long time to index the internet. And what I've seen is typically there's a 3 to 6 month lag. Usually there's like a date that they benchmark it. Like for example, our models that we use internally at Chase are usually 6 months behind because it now Google is a little bit different where Google will actually go if you tell it to and search for recent information and actually go and search live on the internet the same way you do a Google search. Most of the other models are going to use whatever was indexed at the time that that model was last deployed. So I think the answer to your question is no, it doesn't pull the most recent stuff. It just promotes whatever its most recent index is. Now, as I'm going through, so for example, Mizzy, maybe you can help me. You see that it didn't do something recent. How would you describe what you would want it to do? Would you want it to show her recent album, the most recent album, and have it style around that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Or
So
just add that in there somewhere.
change the styling or landing page to highlight her recent 2025 album. 2025, right?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. And Bernadette has a great question about, is it easy to edit and customize the website in Lovable? Is this how you edit it by just giving it more prompts? Or is there a way to edit after it's created it?
So what I'm showing you right now is literally editing it using vibe coding, where I'm using text statements to go in and modify it. So it's going to go in and it's going to make change. It's going to add. I'm assuming this is the correct album, right? It didn't hallucinate an album. I apologize. I don't follow Taylor.
Oh no, she has an even more recent one. Something about the life of a showgirl or something like that.
Okay.
I've just seen it. Haven't listened to it or anything. I'm not a huge Taylor Swift fan.
So I'm going to stop it because I'm realizing it's going in the wrong direction.
There's another really good question, Rich. It
Yep.
says, if you publish that full page, that aren't those images copyrighted? So how does that work to protect the organization and artist?
And again, that's where you get into the ethics of this. Now, certain people, their images are public, and there's so many images of them that it's unlikely you would get sued for copyright infringement, but at a purely risk level, yes. Theoretically, you could, but given how many fan club sites exist and how many images come up that are publicly available through news sites and everything, it's unlikely. Now, if I had personal pictures of them on my website, then yes. Or if I used AI generated photos, I could see getting dinged for that. But again, it really depends on, and you can see it kind of didn't really do a good job. It just changed the header name. Oh, but it did add the album. Okay. But again, you would provide it feedback saying you didn't change the actual background image. So I want to say change the background image. See if it actually does it.
So
Is
the
that the
question in chat says, if you publish it, does it automatically assign a URL? And would you need to purchase a domain?
no? It's actually now how long it stays up and everything is a different story. Like I'm just going to go ahead and publish this now. And if Taylor Swift wants me to take it down, I'll absolutely take it down. It's not a problem. But essentially, this allows me to share it. Now, usually this stuff only stays up for a certain amount of time. But I can actually, and we can provide this. So if you were to, so I'll put this in the chat for Zoom if I can find the Zoom menu. Um, yeah, but you can see this is, so I vibe coded an entire website right here. Meanwhile, my Otter continues to take detailed screenshots of everything we did. So again, I know we're at time. I had a couple, would you guys like me to keep going or would you like me to stop? Thumbs up if you want me to keep going. Okay, I'm going to keep going. All right. So I mentioned, stop reading headlines, start experimenting, start playing with this stuff. You're going to find models that you like that work for your particular line of business. Um, you know, be an AI wrangler. Again, radical critical thinking. I like to tell my students and my staff, be selfish when it comes to tools and what you like, what you enjoy. Um, it also helps you identify what's good, what's bad, and what's awesome. Because a lot of times you need to be able to describe the differences between a really good product and a really bad product. And again, you can always use AI to solve a problem, whether it's a good solution or a bad solution, you need a human to kind of figure that out. And again, that's why your unique human value is irreplaceable. Be the domain expert, the translator. So AI processes, vast amounts of data, but it lacks your expertise. It also can't, even though sometimes it may feel like it knows what's in your head, it doesn't. So it needs you to actually communicate what you want, what you need to be able to do that effectively. And again, adaptability. I was a daily ChatGPT user 2 years ago. Now I am a daily Gemini user. It really depends. And if Gemini makes change to their app or their interface that I don't like, then I might switch back and use other applications. But right now, I primarily use Gemini. The underlying thing that I want everyone to take away here is AI is just a tool. Your human intelligence, judgment, and adaptability are the ultimate leverage that turn that tool into a workshop. You can build things that people can use, or you can build things that make people's lives harder. But you should try to build something with it. That's all I had for today. I did create a Google form. I'd love to get feedback from everyone who attended on this. Um, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. We're going to be doing more sessions. There's another component of the forum where you can actually suggest topics for new sessions. So if you want something on specifically on ethics, you want something specifically on, let's say, AI and agriculture, you can vote for that in the actual forum as well. I'll go ahead and hang on as long as people want, but does anybody have any questions? That's all I had for today. I'll go ahead and leave this up while we're talking. Let me know if anyone has any questions. You can just come off mute and speak. Okay. Sorry, I can't hear you. All right.
Not so much representing Agile and maybe even representing DFSC Me, so I'll take that answer.
Okay. All right, seeing no other questions, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. If there's if there's any other questions or if there's anything you'd like to learn about AI, please reach out. Again, going forward, the next set of sessions will be in person at either the Wilmington or the Dover Library. I'm actually working with our folks at Delaware Libraries to provide laptops so that people can jump in and actually do and test some of the things that we're going to be showing. We're actively looking for other partners and guest speakers for future sessions as well. Hopefully today was really, really valuable. It's a pleasure to have been here to share my world of AI, and hopefully you learned a couple things here today too. So thank you all very much for coming and have a wonderful day.